I'd like to say I'm getting used to sitting here alone in the sanctuary with just some equipment and a few very special friends. But I'm not getting used to it. I rather like when everybody's here with me. But good morning. Happy Sunday. It's Palm Sunday, and I think it's rather appropriate that I sort of have these palms framing me sitting in this chair today because we're moving close to Easter. And it won't be what it usually is, but we will make something spectacular out of that risen consciousness and how we tie that in with the Science of Mind teaching. So before I really get into what I want to say today, I think it would be really sweet for us to just pause, turn within, and let's just anchor this experience this morning in that awareness of the presence. Oh, yeah, it feels good to just still the mind, to return to our center, and to recognize yet again that right where we are, God is. And so I feel the love of God, and I know today that it is that guiding force. It is the day where we begin that week-long walk toward that shift in consciousness, where we rise together in truth. And this year more than ever, I sense the holiness of this Holy Week. And so I speak a blessing for this variation of a Sunday service, knowing that everything is in perfect order, that what needs to be communicated today is easily given and received, and that each of us is a little bit sweetened by the entire experience. And so I'm feeling gratitude for that way that we can indeed still connect with each other. I say thank you, God. I release this time and the words of this invocation into the divine law, knowing we are so amply blessed, and so it is. Amen, amen, amen. So an interesting turn of events has impacted the direction of this talk. What I noticed happened was that I had intended to talk to you about the afterglow of a mystery solved because we had planned to have our sixth annual murder mystery dinner / auction, the greatest fundraiser of the year. It was scheduled to happen last night, and we've had to delay it. So it's still going to happen. We just don't know when, and as soon as we set some dates and the whole world begins moving in a brand new pattern, I'll let you know. I'll relay all of that information. But in the meantime, I expected that we would all be sitting here in this luscious sanctuary this morning with a feeling of afterglow. And that's what I thought I was going to speak about today, afterglow. What it's like to have a successful event in your spiritual community and the way that changes us energetically. The way that we come and we start the service and Reverend Clyde gets up and does some announcements and we do the meet and greet and we just can't hardly calm you down. There's so much chatter and actual joyous vibration because there is something wonderful when we've join together to celebrate good times. And so the mood is different. I would say that I feel a little cheated. I like that afterglow and I like that ride of that feeling that I've worked really hard to pull something off and then you have it resting in your memory and we don't have that. So today instead I'm going to speak to you about the mystery. There's an interesting piece of mystery, and I noticed that as a population, we seem to be really attracted to solving mysteries. It's almost as though we have this idea that life itself is a riddle, and it gives us some sense of comfort to be able to solve mysteries. So if you go to the library or the bookstore or you ask your friends what they're reading or what kind of TV shows they like, you'll often hear that it's the crime dramas, the mystery, the murder mysteries, the detective stories. And even if you don't read mysteries, I don't, my husband does, it's always an interesting conversation. What are you reading today? Oh, I'm reading about God. Oh, I'm reading about crime. But we seem to find a sweet way of coming together with all of that. But I also noticed that beyond just the idea of actual mystery solving, we also like to solve puzzles. We like to build jigsaw puzzles. I'm thinking if my life would slow down a little, I might be pulling out an old jigsaw puzzle because I like to sit at the table and do that. But we also like word puzzles and crossword puzzles and number puzzles. We're hooked on Sudoku, and there's something satisfying about sitting in the question but being able to resolve it and come to a conclusion. So I think it's just human nature. I've been thinking a lot about it this week since I kind of had to change the direction of the message this morning. And what I've been thinking about is that life can get complicated. We are moving through a complex time right now. And we would like to solve the mystery of the virus and all the unanswered questions we have. And so there's something in the human nature of all of that calls us to be good problem solvers. And spiritually speaking, life is more than a riddle to be solved. So I found this quote from Dr. Ernest Holmes, and it's right in the very beginning of the Science of Mind textbook. And he said this, these are interesting words. I put him in the newsletter last week. He said, "The world is tired of mysteries. The world does not understand symbols, and we long for reality." And you know, that reality is that capital R. It's that greater truth that's beyond our human understanding. And so I think what he's saying is that though we may be drawn to solve mysteries and fix problems, sometimes even fix each other, we have to be careful about that. But there's a greater truth that we crave to understand. And in that same chapter in the textbook, he goes on to say, we can study what reality is. We can study that. We can learn about that. We can study where to find it, and we can study how to use it. And he's absolutely right. And in fact, I would say that's what this entire teaching is about. The science of mind as a philosophy or a spiritual exploration, you might say, it is all about those things. What is it? It meaning God. You know, some of us are really comfortable saying God. I have relatives in my life who are not so comfortable, but they also acknowledge that there's some kind of a universal intelligence that keeps life in order. And so at this time, we're questioning a whole lot of that. But when I go back to the basics, when I look at the first 4 chapters of the Science of Mind textbook, what I see is that that's what those 4 chapters are about. It's like, what is the thing itself? What is that thing we call God? Some of us call God. What is that thing, and how can we understand it better? How can we dive in and figure out how to use it? In fact, those first 4 chapters are so important that I recall when I studied to get my practitioner license, that we were getting ready. So I was in prac studies in the late 1990s, and I actually graduated in 2001. And before we took that big exam, we were told to revisit those first 4 chapters. And one of the students in my class recorded them, or bought a recording of the Science of Mind textbook, I guess. And she made us little snippet recordings of those first 4 chapters. And we listened to those readings again and again and again. And it brings you back to understanding the basics of principle. Now, the whole rest of that big, thick textbook is sort of explaining what those first 4 chapters are all about. And it gives you, after you study, if you stay in any experience of study for a while, you get more confident in your understanding of the parlance, the terminology, the way phrases are used in a specific context. So after all those 2 years of studying Science of Mind principles and going back to review and review and review those first 4 lessons was very powerful. It was a deeper meaning of what this spiritual path is all about. So what I think I want to really say today is, yes, there is definitely a mystical aspect of spiritual study and life. In fact, I don't even know that you can study the mystical. I think that the invitation is to have an experience of it. Sort of like when you know you've had a moment of oneness with the divine life, the creator. You know, that's something that's special that happens when you're in nature or having a special moment with another person. But there's a difference between mystery and mystical, the mystic experience. I think that often the spiritual students get sidetracked by thinking that if we just study enough, if we work hard enough at trying to figure out all the spiritual mysteries that seem a bit elusive, that we might be able to grasp it and gain it. But that indeed is the very riddle of all of it. And in fact, when we are fixated on why, we sort of begin to miss the point. So the more you study, then the you know what they say, the great wisdom traditions tell us that the more you study, the more you're aware of what you don't know, and eventually we begin to make peace with the fact that there is that whole area of that which we call mysticism, which is not the same as the basic principles of spirituality that we can learn to understand and use and apply in our physical lives. So I would simplify it by saying that's what Dr. Holmes meant and other great poets meant when they spoke of love and law. Those of you who listen to me regularly have heard me say that before. But I think that when we begin to step into the mystical side is where we begin to practice our faith. So isn't it interesting, in Eastern philosophies, they talk a lot about not knowing and the unknown, and that's a part of how they move through their life. But in Western spiritual traditions, Christianity has this rigid way of sort of presenting itself as though we have it all figured out. And all you have to do is A, B, and C, and voila, we're saved. And I just think, what a gorgeous time for us to rest, since we are invited to not get out as much. We have this time to sort of contemplate these other elements of the mystical spiritual path. I've noticed through the years that students, one of them's actually sitting in this room right now, I won't say her name, but she's behind one of the cameras. What I noticed through the years is when I get people who are new to the Science of Mind teaching, and we start teaching you how to use it, is that people get fixated on why. Oh, there she is. And why? But teach me why. I want to know. So I'm learning this stuff, and now this event happened in my life. Why? Tell me why. Why did that happen? And then at some point, so I can talk you through all of that, but at some point, I just stop and I kind of get in your face and go, quit asking why. You know, don't ask why. That there's something that happens when we get fixated on wanting to know why everything happens the way it happens. We start missing the point, because the point is bigger than that. The question shouldn't be why. The question, especially right now in all of our lives, should be, what is this pointing me toward? What else is there here for me to understand? What else can I gain or learn from this experience that I am now walking through? Whether it was my choice or not, we're all sitting in the same place of responsibility as to how we now move forward. So a great question is, what else can I learn from this? Whatever your why is, right? Not just the virus, but all those crazy whys in our life. some of the big whys that people are looking at right now, and what I'm hearing in conversation is the things that we're worried about with the way we're in a different, completely different environment for the way we're living our lives. But one of the questions is money. What will happen to my income now? How am I going to get through this financially? Other people are concerned about their loved ones, especially those in the age brackets who are identified as more vulnerable, or your family members that are not healthy, even if they aren't in the age brackets. And then, I mean, come on, all of us are like scratching our head over the toilet paper issue. I mean, it's so strange that it's something so basic, and yet it's something that we now have concern over. I don't know about you, but I rarely worried about toilet paper. About a month ago, I don't think it was on my radar at all. So here we are. The world is different. We're given all these opportunities to ask new questions now, to look at a mystery, to stand in the reality of spiritual principle and feel safe enough to look at the questions and to be smart enough to rephrase some of those questions. So here's the funny part for me. I've been saying, probably as long as I've been a senior minister, I've been saying, church is changing, you know, and it's like, we've got to stay current. We got to know why is church, what do people want now? Why is it different and all of that? Well, hey, I took a big breath this week and I had this funny little thought. Remember that children's game? So here's the church and here's the steeple and open the door and here's all the people. Well, church is changing. We not only don't have a steeple, we got no people. So, you know, what are we going to do about that? Well, look at us. Look at us. This is only the third week we have sat in this room and created, through this advanced wisdom of technology, this way of bringing a Sunday service to our community. And there's just a lot changing. Have you thought about how many new terms are in our vocabulary in the last couple weeks, last month or so? We are now social distancing. And I'm hearing some arguments about, I don't like that term because they're telling us to be social. So I've heard people saying we're physically distancing. But yesterday I read a beautiful term called spatial distancing, and I like that. That's going to work for me. We're spatial distancing. We're looking at state lockdown. That's a scary term. We're self-quarantining, as needed. We are looking at mandated shelter in place, and now we're talking about rephrasing those words that are already, you can already Google those words because they're so embedded in our consciousness now, whether we want that or not. And I think it's really useful for us to look at that. How easy it can be, and in what a short period of time we have shifted our consciousness to be able to understand what those terms mean. I think we're just scratching the surface of having a really healthy talk about the meaning of Easter, which I will save for next week because we will be doing that. I probably will not be wearing a bonnet because I'm not feeling all that festive lately. But this is serious business. This moving through the spring of 2020, we will remember this. And I think because it's serious business, it would be good business on our part to make the best out of the personal application and the way we can tap into those spiritual tools I've been talking about. So isn't it funny? We've been mandated to sit still. And I have been nagging you for years to have a sitting practice. I think it's lovely. I think the whole universe is coming into agreement with what I believe. Have I not said for years now, I have said every man, woman, and child should have a sitting practice. If you can't sit for 15 minutes, sit for 5 minutes. If you can't sit for 5 minutes, take 1 minute, but sit quietly. And now, suddenly our lives are rearranged, and most of us, not all of us, because I, for one, feel busier than I had been before this. People in the medical world are much busier. There are a lot of people in occupations, my grocery store, people that support me in getting product right now that I need, and produce and everything. I'm grateful for the long, hard hours that they're working and for the ways in which they have already put themselves at risk. But the rest of everybody that's home right now, that's not used to being home, suddenly we have an opportunity to look at having a sitting practice. So I think it's like somebody on Facebook said, God gave us all a timeout. I love that. So it's sort of a mandated sitting practice now. And I want you to look at it as an opportunity to do things that I have been urging us all to do for quite a while. I've also been talking about the way we are moving. We have been emerging for years now, but I've been feeling more and more of the edginess of us being sort of bounced up into a new era, an evolutionary shift in the era of where we live. So in other words, we went from hunters and gatherers into the industrial era, into the technology era, and now I believe we're taking that, we're standing in the foundation of that technology wisdom, and we are now in one fell swoop, we have been boosted up this next level. So what I notice in my own life, and because I can only do it from my experience and therefore share that with you and encourage you to look for this experience in your own life, what I've noticed is my consciousness around technology has radically changed. I have risen in consciousness around my ability to use technology and about my relationship with technology. So I didn't know how to do most of what I'm doing. I'm doing on a regular basis now things I only learned 2 or 3 weeks ago that I fought and resisted for years before now. And you know what happened? The world changed, a fell swoop, I said. It's because it's fun to say fell swoop. Okay, it kind of feels like you're here. I'm just kind of feeling you now. So the world changed, and suddenly, if I want to be close to you, and I want to do my job and support you in these spiritual ways, I had to make peace with my aversion to technology. I would have never said to you, I'm afraid of it. I would have never admitted I had an aversion to it. I rather grew to like my smartphone. But there were things I was blocking that suddenly, because the world changed, and I found myself sitting in my space, in my sacred space, with this nudge to figure out how to do this stuff. And I was no longer afraid. I would say to you, I think it's the difference between approaching a task in love or in fear, even though I would never have said to you, I'm afraid of this. I wasn't afraid of that, but I didn't know how to approach it in love, and now I do. And because of that willingness, and that way our hearts open in that alignment with spirit itself, and that wisdom, and that call for us to rise in consciousness right now, in whatever ways we're being called, individually and collectively, then let's just rise. Let's do that. Because this is one small example of a shift in consciousness, and the shift in consciousness is happening around the globe right now in much bigger ways than our use of technology. That's so important. Let's rest in that possibility of how much good is already percolating and bubbling up. So I think that as we move through this massive change, it is a call. It's a call for a call. It is a call, a divine call that promotes a bigger worldview. Nobody's immune. Everywhere around the globe, there's equal opportunity for the spread of this virus. I think that it's a call for us to sit still and to grow in our understanding of each other. That there are a lot of different ideas about what's happening right now. And there's also a call for us to join in this spiritual or this mystical, the unknown place of reality with a capital R, and to use practical principles to soothe us, to reassure us, so that we can indeed do all those things I've been saying for years. Stop, breathe, change your mind, choose again, and see what direction you are being pointed in now. Because there is no, you know, I've heard people making fun of this statement, we're in this all together. And I would say, no, don't make fun of that. Don't put that down. Don't use that in a derogatory way, because we are in this in a way that is leveling us to see the sameness. So yes, we're unique and glorious individual expressions of God, and we are all the same. And so we are here having, maybe for the first time ever, because we have the global connection that we have never had in any other pandemic before, that we can see the sweetness of the way we're sharing it in our togetherness. So here's something else I was thinking about this week. You know, all the sagey wisdom, the wise sages that put together these great ideas, the classical philosophers, and then those people that founded New Thought, metaphysical spirituality, so that it could come into the form that we see it today. So I'm talking about when you study the roots of the science of mind, or the roots of New Thought, we all go back to the same people. We look at Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, and we look at Mary Baker Eddy, and we go to Emma Curtis Hopkins, and then we see the Fillmores, Myrtle and Charles Fillmore. And I want to tell you about each of those people that I have named. Each of those great thinkers paused in their own lives and brought a piece of wisdom that we have put together to create this great philosophy. And here's what I want to say. They had that wisdom because they experienced a condition that was not a good condition. So we know that they had illnesses. They had incurable diseases, some of them. In the case of Mary Baker Eddy, it was an accident. She slipped on ice and she injured her back and was in tremendous pain. But what they all have in common is that at some point they believed in the power of mental healing. And they stopped what they were doing and they dived deep into study and to personal application. They looked at scripture and how to apply that. And through their own frailty, they rose. They got higher in consciousness. Okay, awkward moment. But there's this great rise in consciousness because of our willingness. So can we understand that they weren't heroes? They weren't brilliant people. Quimby was a clockmaker, right? They were people who had frailties and they determined to rise above them. And in that process, in that application of spiritual principles that they were experimenting with, they experienced healings, and they were able to articulate how others might also do the same. We are given a great privilege right now. We are given a great privilege right now. You see, most of us won't get sick. Most of us won't get the virus. But all of us are moving through this together. And some of us are rebelling, and some of us are insistent that we aren't going to get it. Some of us maybe are doing a little spiritual bypass. I don't think it matters, because I don't think there are right or wrong answers right now. what we can do is to notice what we're thinking. Pay attention to what you're speaking. Notice what you're sharing on Facebook or other social media, and what encourages you and what pisses you off. But keep the conversations going. Because the more that we look at what we're speaking and thinking and saying and interacting with, it's going to direct us to what we are believing. And it is in that place of understanding what your hidden beliefs are that you will heal any of your concerns around money right now. You will heal any concerns about the physical ailments. You will heal what you have believed about death, because death is not the enemy. This is the way we raise the dead and heal the sick and cast out the demons. It is in our willingness to stand in truth and to see what's right, not what's broken. Some people are saying that the virus is a wake-up call. I hope it is. It seems like it is to me. Some people are saying that it's nature revolting, that we have done horrible things to the planet and now the planet's getting even with us, or it's just cause and effect, that we are suffering now the consequences of the whole. I have nothing to say good about that, so I'll try to say nothing. And still others are, and actually this happened to me this week, there are other people who are rejoicing because the Bible, Scripture, the prophecy of the Bible is finally being fulfilled and God is wiping the wickedness off the earth. Someone tried to save me this week and steer me in a slightly different direction, and I know it's just because people love me, and I don't care what you believe right now. You know, I don't care. What I care is what we do with what we're moving through. I, for one, do not want to be pointing fingers outside of me and blaming this virus on anything or anyone or any group or any negligence. Every illness, every accident has wisdom in it if we are willing to go there. And maybe that's a part of what the purpose of the planet is. I mean, I have my own beliefs. You get to figure out yours. But let's be asking those questions. Mary Baker Eddy didn't slip on the ice and injure her back so that she could learn spiritual principles. She had a human condition experience and then made something out of it. And that's what I want us to see. I know I've said this a lot in the last few months. I've probably 4 or 5 times I've just been so in my face. I've had or going through my mind the story of when the disciples went to Jesus and said, why was that baby born blind? Was it did the parents do something wrong? Did generations before the parents do something that the baby inherited the sins of the father, that the baby then had to be blind? And don't ever forget what Jesus said. You are asking the wrong question. Don't ask why. Let's change the question. Let's open ourselves to the miracle and the wisdom that is here for us, the individual wisdom and the collective wisdom. There are miracles right in front of us, every one of us. So I have this great quote. Paul Purcell, someone I quote from time to time, he's a neuropsychologist, so he has a lot of wisdom that fits nicely with the Science of Mind teaching. Paul said this: miracles come when we realize that even the worst news is only a short story of the whole plot, that something bigger is unfolding. The plot is the mystery. Be humble in your perpetual uncertainty. And so I want to end this morning with this really amazing quote I was reminded of this week. Winston Churchill, man, this is a human being that knew how to walk through a crisis. And he said something short and sweet that I think we want to pay attention to now. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Never let a good crisis go to waste. Oh, please do not let this good crisis go to waste. Use this opportunity, this time, this your own foibles in thought and the way that we listen to other people and the things we read, and notice your own opinions about what you read or what you hear on the news. Use that. So I admit I was disappointed we could not talk about Afterglow today. That's what I wanted to do. But we didn't have a party. And still, we are glowing. And I think that that's the beautiful part of the mystical journey, is that we learn to recognize that inner glow, that divine, gorgeous inner light, and we allow that to be what calls us forward, what gives us the wisdom, the light, and shows us the way. All right, so that's really all I wanted to say about all of that. And as always, it's so sweet to just anchor the ideas in the words of prayer, and I never know what's going to happen right now. And I especially don't know what's going to happen today or any other day. And I want to take that idea of afterglow, that we just heard this message, and that there's something in it that bubbles and stirs within us. And what that is the presence of God. So let's turn within. Let's take that stirred wisdom and allow it to be the guiding light as we move through these words of prayer. I just feel the love of God within me. That movement, that sureness of the activity of life inside. I know that right where I am, God is, and that right where you are, God is, and that there is no place where God is missing or limited or confined in any way. And what I know to be the truth about God is that God is love, God is peace, God is power, God is plenty, and God is joy and beauty and perfect order. And so as we come together and feel our union with love and with peace and with beauty and with joy, I simply know that we have been called to this very moment to sit in the unfolding words of this prayer and allow ourselves to be transformed. I see that it is a condition of life itself that teaches us the ways in which to deepen our faith, to strengthen our conviction for spiritual principles, to know the things unseen, but to feel the sureness of them. Peace, the peace that passes our human understanding, is that vibration of love and of calm and serenity that soothes our weary souls. For we have been doing battle. And this day, and in the words of this prayer, I say that we set down the armor, that we rest from the battle, and that we awaken to the beauty of the truth, the miraculous lives that we lead, and to know that always we have the strength and the power and the guidance to do the things we need to do. So in any way that any members of our family or in our own lives, any ways in which we may have been impacted by this condition that has been named a pandemic, we know that greater than pandemic is the love of God, is the truth of God, is the light of God, and that guidance, that protection, that divine knowing, and that in that divine way, we can trust that the universe is just putting things in a better order. That we are lifted of the heaviness that we have carried up to now, and that we stand in the comfort of each other's arms as we have learned to be spatially connected, not disconnected. That socially we are absolutely one because there is only one mind. It is the mind of God. It is perfect, and it is my mind right now, and it is the mind of every person listening to the sound of this voice. Just feel that love within you now. Feel it. Know that it is the way in which our body heals what ails us. It is what heals the planet. It is what raises the dead. It is what lifts us from our imperfections into a risen consciousness to see even greater and greater perfection in this world, just as it is. And so I say, thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, life. Thank you, infinite spirit. How grateful I am this day, in this very moment, to know again it's all okay, that we are well, and it is well with our soul. Thank you, life. Thank you, spirit. I release these words. I allow them to be. And together we say, and so it is. Amen, amen, amen. We're going to do our offering and come get my check. It would make me so happy to drop my money in the little golden plate. I'm giving a little extra today because it's good for the soul and it's good for the center. Thank you very much. And we are going to take our bucket outside again. If you live close to the center and you'd like to get out of the house for a little drive-by and drop off your offering, have some fun. People did it last week, and it was really exciting for us, and it was really exciting for you. So we encourage you to do that. You can also mail in. You can go to our website, wvcsl.com, and we have a donate button. You might have to scroll down, but it's also in the little buttons on the right side of the page, my right, your left. If you just let your cursor roll over those, you'll see the donate button is right there. Make sure you give. We really, we're doing our best to keep things going here at the center. The bills are still coming in, and you've been doing a good job. I will just say I'm really pleased with the effort everybody's making. Anything else that needs to be said? All the information, and we have 8 groups right now. We have spiritual practices going online. We're doing Zoom in all kinds of crazy ways. We're figuring out the defects. I hope the volume was better. Today we even have one more trick with a little microphone that we might try next week. We'll see how today goes. And, we're working the kinks out. Thank you for your feedback. We greatly appreciate it. And so now I just want to remind you that right where you are, God is. And that right now something wonderful is happening through you. And it is this thing called life. And life is in your mind, and life is in your body, and life is in all these crazy conditions. And we know it. We think it. We feel it. We know it. We claim it. And we accept it the way that it is, but we accept it the way that it is becoming, because what's coming is going to be good, baby. Let's not turn our back on that. Let's not give up hope. Let's stand together. Let's inspire each other and know that this too shall pass and that we're going to be in this sanctuary again soon. So, meanwhile, pray often, love much.
Questions?
Oh, I'm reminded we're doing questions. Well, now I'm not in my comfort zone anymore. All right, so you have an opportunity to, they're typing in questions?
Typing in questions.
All right, so I have Tracy and Juliana here who are going to ask me, I did almost forget that. Okay. Okay, take a breath.
Yeah.
Let it go, and let's see what you got.
It might take a few minutes.
Yeah, we're going to just give you some time to type in your questions. I'm going to try not to sing because that's what I like to do, is sing. I haven't been singing enough lately.
Tell them to type a Q, because sometimes questions take a long time.
Just
To put a Q in if they have a question. And then
just type in a Q, and then we'll know you have a question. There's some advice, and it'll give you time to type. I wrote a song once. I just remembered. It went to the tune of that Sound of Music song. It'd probably be better if I didn't remember it. Just saying.
I have a
All right.
question.
Do you have any cues? No cues?
I have a question.
Okay, we got a question from the Peanut Gallery.
So when we're at home and we happen to turn on the news, although I don't watch the news, how do we deal with all of the things that we're hearing? Like, what are some practices that I can do to recognize or filter out the things that just bombard us every
Yeah.
day?
Well, the question is, what can I do if I'm watching the news? How do I then use spiritual practice to filter that out? And so my first comment is always that funny one: turn off the TV. But here's an interesting turn of events. I have started watching the news. See, I don't normally watch the news. I'm very choosy how I get my news. And I'll look for articles that support me, and people will send me interesting things. I pay attention to what other ministers are reading. But I've been watching the news. My husband finds it perplexing. And I just kind of want to get a feel for for those of you who watch the news, I want to kind of take your temperature. I want to get a feel for the climate of what happens when you watch the news. But I got to shake it off when I'm done watching it. I notice quickly, this is such a good tool, notice where your mind goes. I typically get angry. I'll just confess to you, I get angry. And I have strong opinions, which I will tell you they are judgments. I have no problem admitting my opinions are judgments. I don't know why we think if we don't call them judgments, we don't have them. But I look at that, and then I think that's where we get to practice forgiveness. And it's not so much that I forgive myself, but I accept myself that, I do still have opinions about all that stuff going on in the news. And then I try and notice, the beauty of the question, Tracy, is I try and notice, where did fear try and jab me a little bit? So I have a pretty regimented spiritual practice, which you would want me to, but I want me to. And so I take advantage of those opportunities to see where I might have a little fur steering. Fear stirring, and that's where I do my spiritual mind treatment. That's where I focus. If I'm afraid of that, that tells me what I know I need to pray for and become more aware of. Jesus said, "Don't see the blind baby. See the opposite of that. What is that? The seeing eye. How do we see more miracles?" And I really use that personally. And then if I get really overwhelmed, I got a prayer partner. And I have a prayer partner that I can say anything to, and she will not judge me. And so I really think everybody should have a prayer partner right now. If you haven't done it yet, do it. I've asked all my practitioners, pray every day with another human being. Not just doing your own prayer work in the morning. Pray with other people every day.
Perfect.
Thanks.
You.
Any questions have come through?
So we can invite folks to send questions that you might be able to address next Sunday as well.
Wonderful.
So if you have any questions, please feel free to email them.
Yes, email your questions during the week. You can email them to the center, or you can email them to me, revkrice1111@gmail.com.
And we'll address them next Sunday.
And we'll be happy to sit on them and ask them.
And also,
Your answer.
underneath the feed, you can type your questions in. Sometimes you have to type that Q because we know questions can take a long time to type in.
Yes.
And we'll watch the feed throughout the week if you type this in after the feed's over.
Oh, they can type in a Q after the feed's over. Can they also type in their question?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm at home watching this on replay,
you can address the questions right
wonderful,
there because they can comment on it through the week. The cue is so that you know there's a question coming so that you don't disconnect before they can type the question.
Okay.
So please type your questions.
Got the
Bless
Rona.
you.
Somebody heal me quick.
And send in your questions. We know that there must be a lot of them. We want to make sure that we're addressing your concerns and sending you love. And
Lots of questions, and we welcome them. So, yeah, do indeed.
don't be
Let us
shy.
know.
Now's your time. You got it all
Now's
to
your
yourself.
time. Right.
When do you get Reverend Karen all to yourself to ask her your very own question? So please send them in. We look forward to answering them.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And thanks for reminding me. And have a blessed week. See you soon.